Nikki, please call the roll.
All right. Nikki Austin, present. Jim Curran.
Present.
Mike Davis.
Present.
Mike Braseth.
Present.
Nicole Josephs.
Present.
Teresa Keen is absent. Steve Mayer.
Present.
Terry Montgomery is absent. And then Phil Vosberg, we know is here somewhere.
In the building.
He's in the building. All right.
Great. So with that, I will call our June 23rd regular Board of Education meeting to order. First item for approval is our agenda for tonight. Take a look, and then I'd look for a motion to approve our agenda for this evening. So moved. Second. Motion by Mike F., second by Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, next up is our consent agenda. Give board members a second just to take a look, see if there's anything you'd like to pull off. Shorter consent agenda for tonight. Does any board member wish to pull anything off the consent agenda?
I move to approve.
Got a motion by Nikki. Second. Second by Mike Davis. I'll go ahead and read the consent items. Item A is to approve our minutes from the June 9th meeting. Item B is to approve our acceptance of community donations. We've got 3 from the Monroe Morning Optimist Club, $4,000 to the Teacher Fund Program. From Mary Ann Johnson, $30 to Backpack Buddies. And from Donald Jr. and Bonnie Barker, $50 to Backpack Buddies. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Seeing no public comment, unless Mr. Jubeck would like to opine. No? Okay, we'll keep moving. No old business tonight, so we're gonna move on to new business. We've got 3 exciting announcements to make tonight. The first 3 items in new business. I just wanna, I guess before, well, maybe 2 things. One, just calling back to our consent items, say a huge thank you to those who donated, especially the Monroe Morning Optimist Club. That was a very generous donation. Appreciate that. And in that same vein of the generosity of our community, we've got some exciting sponsorship announcements for tonight that I want to give Joe the chance to share more about.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. We're excited to continue the work with the community to identify sponsors to secure naming rights for spaces in our new high school. And tonight, we're excited to announce that we have 3 new spaces that will enter into agreements for those naming rights. Moser and Associates has long been known as a huge supporter of the community, schools, kids, and we're excited tonight to announce that Moser and Associates, through Scott Moser's leadership, has secured the rights for the indoor concession stand, the outdoor concession stand, and the choral music room. So all 3 spaces will bear the name of Moser and Associates. As I said, you know, I've known the Moser family for a long time. Obviously, Teresa serves on our board. Joellen Moser was one of the people that took care of me when I first came into the district in 1998, and certainly served on the Big Brothers Big Sisters board with Dave Moser for a number of years. And this is just another example of the Moser family stepping up and doing great things. Scott has been a longtime coach in our district and has done outstanding work. And if you talk to any of the kids that have participated in track or cross country with Scott, they'll tell you every day that they love him, and he's been a great mentor and coach. And so to have Moser and Associates step up in this way is really incredible, and we're very thankful. We have it on the agenda as the 3 separate items. So the indoor concession stand is a $30,000 10-year agreement. The outdoor concession stand is a $30,000 10-year agreement. And then the choral music room is a $10,000 10-year agreement. So again, we're just really fortunate to live and work in a community where people are so generous, and truly excited to have Moser and Associates part of the project going forward. So be happy to answer any questions before the board goes through the 3 separate motions. And Ron, certainly jump in here because Ron was part of this work as well.
Joe, can you just, for anyone joining that hasn't watched previous meetings, can you just restate the purpose of these funds and how they'll be used?
Sure, thanks, Mike, good clarification. So, to be clear, the naming and sponsorship funds that are collected are being used for maintenance purposes going forward. Our high school build is not only on schedule, but it's on budget. So we have the funds to build the high school as it's currently planned and being built, and being finally built, I might add. But what this will do is allow us to put those funds in a special revenue fund where they can be used to provide maintenance, maybe upgrades as necessary over the years, so that when we get 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future, there'll be funds available to take care of that versus pulling it out of the general fund and taking funds away from the regular educational activities in our district. So those conversations have been clear with both Mosier and Associates and a variety of other business leaders that have stepped up. And we're excited to have that kind of long-term care available to the district. Ron, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's good foresight by the board and the district to make sure that, you know, we understand the commitment to the new building right now, but obviously, you know, various costs, you know, the sound system in the PAC at some point has to be replaced, right? And so being able to have the funds, sponsorships in place to allow us to fund those items when they come up and occur will be great in saving the district costs in the long term. And then as with any of the areas in the building, anyone who chooses a 10-year sponsorship agreement will have the first right to renew that when their 10 years come up.
Any other questions for Joe?
No, just a huge thank you to Mosier and Associates and all those that have stepped up already. It's really exciting to see this coming together now. So huge thanks.
Yeah, and I do have to, I know I spoke to this earlier, but Scott was fantastic through the process. He contacted us early. He wanted to be a part of this project. He actually had secured another space that he was excited about, and then learned that there's another business that truly wanted that space, and he was good enough to say, we'll take a step back, we'll do something different. So again, just a real team player, not just supporting the district, but other businesses in the community. So can't say enough about Scott and his leadership.
Thanks, Joe. All right, so I look for a motion to approve the sponsorship and naming rights of the new high school's indoor concession stand to Mosier and Associates Insurance Services for $30,000 over the course of 10 years.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Phil, second by Nicole. Any discussion before we vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. I'm just gonna take these in succession. Is there anything else you want to say by item, Joe?
Nope, I think we covered it.
Okay. So I'll look for a motion to approve the sponsorship and naming rights of the new high school's outdoor concession stand to Mosier and Associates Insurance Services for $30,000 over the course of 10 years.
So moved.
Motion by Nikki, second by Nicole. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Finally, look for a motion to approve the sponsorship and naming rights of the new high school's choral music room to Mosier and Associates Insurance Services of $10,000 over the course of 10 years.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mike Davis, second by Phil. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you again to Mosier family, to Scott and Dave and Joe. I really appreciate the support of Monroe School District. All right, next up, we've got an action item for reallocation of ELL staff. Turn over to Joe to give us the information there.
Sure, so this is a situation that really kind of emerged over the last month and a half. You may remember that we had a support staff member, Alex Hernandez, worked at Parkside. Alex was with us for a year, Monroe High School graduate, did a fantastic job. We were sad to see Alex go, but he was given a great opportunity at the YMCA with some of the new staffing. And through that process, as we looked at our needs, we reflected and identified that our ELL needs at Parkside Elementary have been reduced recently due to spreading out some of the support to kids, not only at Parkside, but also at Northside Elementary. So in working with them, we felt that we had an opportunity to maybe repurpose a position. At the same time, we've become aware that there's a former ELL teacher who was wildly successful while working with us that went away for a bit and is looking to come back in a part-time capacity. And so using these two things, we put them together. And really what we would like is approval from the board to move that, the resources for that full-time support staff position invested in a part-time ELL position at the high school, which will meet some significant needs that we see coming in with a new class of students to make sure that they're properly supported. By doing this, it'll be cost neutral. We'll be able to stay within budget, but it'll allow us to meet the needs of our kids that we currently have versus just sticking with what we've historically done with staffing in our ELL program. So, Ron, I know you were part of this with Todd. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I mean, I think just the amount of students in the last 2 to 3 years who come in at the middle or high school grade level who had significant language needs and in some case maybe hadn't even been attending school for a number of years has put quite a strain on that high school ELL staff. And then the fact that we're able to actually have someone, we've been struggling to find ELL teachers, period, right? So the ability to find someone who's a part-time ELL teacher who's willing to take that role. Alex was a great staff member for us as a support staff, but to be able to have somebody in there who's a Spanish-speaking ELL teacher will really be a boon for that high school program.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, Ron. There's no question that we need to provide additional support at the high school next year. There's a lot of needs in the building already, and there's gonna be even more next year. And so as we continue to see diverse needs across all of our schools, we have to be responsive and use the data that's available to make smart decisions in staffing.
So am I hearing it correctly, then it looks like potentially could keep growing even more than what it is right now?
Certainly,
So we have to
that's,
keep a close eye on it.
that's the trend we've seen over a number of years, but certainly the most recent years would indicate that that doesn't seem to be plateauing anytime in the future. And that's true of many of the communities around us as well.
Okay.
Other questions for Joe or Ron on this move? Okay, I'd look for a motion to approve the part-time ELL teacher position as presented by administration.
Is this an action item, Joe?
I believe we did, Todd submitted it.
It's
He had it
informational.
as informational, okay,
Because it's cost neutral.
okay.
So we
Sorry, so we don't
we
need
are
to.
taking action or we're not?
Ron, so you thought, yeah.
If a
it's-
motion has been made, I'd say go ahead and just, doesn't
I
hurt us.
think it's on the agenda as an action item. I think we take the vote.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Phil. Second by Steve. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we've got the team here for the high school building project. Turn it over to Joe and Ron, and you guys can kind of lead us through the update.
Ron, you gonna cue these guys up?
No, I was gonna turn them loose for the most part. It's,
Ryan and where am I at now today?
I'm Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Hi,
I don't see Tony. I haven't seen Tony in like 3 days, and so I lost his name. You know, when Tony was gone for a couple days himself, so yeah, I lost him. Haven't worked with Tony for 5 years now. But Ryan and Tony are here. Talk a little bit about, Tony's gonna go through the video again, kind of show the progress that's been made over the course of the last month. I know the drone footage is a little jerky. We've had a little bit of wind issues and some other weather issues recently as we've been trying to get the new footage. And then Ryan's gonna talk a little bit about certainly the budget updates, but then if you look under the executive content, he's gonna talk a little bit about you know, kind of the furniture budget, and, you know, that's one of the lines we had pared back with the hopes that if the budget held, we were gonna be able to put some additional allocation back there, so he's gonna talk to that, so I'll turn it over to Tony first.
All right, is the video queued up? I'm gonna talk about AID for just a couple minutes here before we get to the video. So as a part of this referendum, we have some work at Abraham Elementary School. We still have some leftover funds from previous summer's work, so it's been chosen to use some of those funds for some things that are happening right now. Three main areas in that school that are getting touched right now. One is the gymnasium. So what we did first is we went in there and we painted all the walls and sprayed the ceiling and the joists and everything, take some of that yellow coloring away. That is completed, that portion of the work in the gym is completed. They've also removed the old floor that's there. So they scraped all that up, that came up pretty nice. And it's ready for new flooring, and the delivery for new flooring is next week. So that's coming along nicely. Aside from that, there's some exterior, or some hallways and stairwells that are just getting the facelift with some painting from a hired painting company. I'd say that's about 50% complete. And then lastly, the exterior fascia boards are getting wrapped with steel fascia to kind of, you know, maintain some fascia boards that are failing a little bit. So that's scheduled to start Monday too. So everything's on track to be finished up at this point, probably about mid-July. So in good shape for being done by the end of the summer. Any questions on Abe?
That's great. It's been long overdue at that building. That gym's gonna look nice.
Yeah, that all fit within the original Abe allocation,
Yep.
so, yeah.
All right, then I guess what we'll do is we'll just kind of let's go through the main portion, and then when it gets to June, you can just kind of stop.
Okay.
And I'll just talk about random spots. So we'll let the video go here for the first minute or so, and you can kind of just see the progress over the past few months. It goes all the way back to the beginning of the project, so I know some of you have seen all this before, but it's a good refresher.
Minus when it was just a pile of dirt. Also reminds us how much rain we got in November.
Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting looking at this, I didn't see much snow on this video.
No, it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and again, Tyler being there at the beginning when we were just moving dirt and then coming back recently, he's like, oh.
Yeah, I guess while this is going, I could highlight just kind of our last weekly update, you know. I'll be hitting a lot of the construction things here in a minute, but we did have a couple new faces on the project update here in the corner. I don't know if you saw it, highlighting some past students. So Tyler, of course, is back working as an internship this summer for us. He's diving in quick and learning a lot of different things as he's changed his major to construction management. And also Jace D, I'll call it. What'd you say?
Doffenbaugh.
Doffenbaugh, okay, great. He's looks like he's installing some hangers there in the photo that you've seen, so he's working with North American Mechanical Youth Apprenticeship Program, so. So yeah, as far as that goes, I guess, yeah.
Paused it, we got to the jittery
Perfect.
droid and then we paused it.
Perfect. So what you see here is just obviously looking at the main entrance. You see a lot more green happening there. That means the exterior board of the walls going up. On the left half and the right half up there, you've seen a lot of windows be put in. I'd say about 60% of the windows on this half that's closest to us is probably done. Majority of the roof is done except for on the west side of the site that we're looking at. Not much done in the parking lot there on the south just because it's a major staging area. But we are starting to get some of that stuff cleaned up. We got one of our trailers out of the way earlier this morning, so we're trying to eye that up for the next area to kind of get looking nicer.
So where you see the green at the main entrance and along a number of those windows is areas where you're gonna see the red panels on the building, so.
So you can let it spin a little bit too, if you'd like. Yeah, it was windy.
Looks like they're working in the,
Yeah, if you want to stop here.
looks like they were working in the ponds too.
Yep, a little bit. So off to the right here, so as you can, off to the right here is obviously the track and the tennis courts. So we made significant progress on getting site fills and cuts almost complete. You know, that's one thing we came into this spring and summer just leery about with the rains, and we've gotten really pretty lucky. We kind of got a jump start putting some lime in that 18-foot fill, if you remember me talking about last time. So that really got us off to a great jump start, and I think we're on our last lift right now in the ball fields. So it's great. We do have a little bit of soil we have to deal with in the tennis courts yet, but we're nearing completion with the big mass grading move, which is great. You know, just a couple, 6 weeks ago, I feel like we were talking about there was 65,000 yards that needed to be moved yet this year, and we're almost done with it. So,
Yeah, so for those of you who don't do this every day or aren't involved, so basically, as they blew the rock out of the stadium, in the tennis areas, and you had that pile of not only some rocks in there that got crushed up, but also, a lot of clay that was down there. That all's been moved, so when they talk about the site balancing, the site balances, but we're moving a lot of, fill, and earthwork from one area of the site to a different area of the site. So a lot of the clay that was under what is now going to be the football stadium and tennis courts ended up going over and lifting up or filling up what was the baseball, softball areas.
It's mostly in that balance, you don't have to haul off site.
yeah, that's the whole goal.
Don't have to haul in or
Because
off.
That's where all your costs would really skyrocket as you start hauling everything off. Yeah, Fairgraham did a pretty darn good job with that all along. They were complimented by the earthwork contractor throughout the project and getting it pretty close, so. All right, if you wanna let it spin just a little bit more. Okay, right there. So like right at the bottom here is obviously the football field. We're pretty much done with putting utilities in that area, at least the bulk utilities. There is some electrical that needs to happen. So on that hillside there, you can kind of see some steel off to the side of the building. Once that steel gets removed, we're gonna start digging foundations for the grandstands this week. And then we'll still really start seeing some of our concrete crews ramp back up on site. Ever since the foundations for the building kind of got done, they've slowed down a little bit, but we're gonna get back and start on the grandstands and then move to the concession buildings, and keep going with, the greenhouses and other odds and ends foundations.
Because you have two different crews, right, Tony? One crew that does foundations, and then you have a different company that's doing flat work for you.
A little bit of both. So like, without getting too much into the weeds, around the outside of the site, that's correct. CG Schmidt's doing most of the foundations, all the flat work, which is sidewalks, patios, curb and gutter, is all being done by Parisi. So, but talking about the building here, I guess, when you see in the gym there, that's all queued up to get roofing pretty soon. The western half of the site is pretty well roofed, actually. The northwest wing and area B and C where the CTE is and the kitchen is all roofed and looking good. So,
Interior grading, I know you were getting close last week.
yeah, so interior grading in the gymnasium is complete now. The underground electrical is ready to go. We do have a pretty large pour schedule for this week. I think it's like 430 cubic yard pour in that gym. We're gonna try to do it all in one shot, just so we can prevent any curling and things happening underneath that floor. So that's kind of the big thing for this week, if everything goes as planned. Once we get that done, we'll have about 80% of the concrete slabs down in the building. As you can see in this picture, we have obviously the biggest bulk that will be left then is the commons, slab and anything on second floor around their auditorium. But otherwise, things are looking good there.
In the performing arts, inside the performing
Yep.
arts, yeah.
All right, you can rotate a little bit if you like. All right, stop her there. So one big improvement we've got here is you can see all the black down there. That's asphalt binder course. So there's 2 layers of asphalt that go down. We typically put down the binder course first, and then we do the finish course later. So I calculate about 55 to 60% of the site's asphalt is paved now with just the first course, which is basically the majority of the north half. So is the road, 8.5 Street, that goes all the way down, kinda, just to the bottom left of this picture. But then you also see some sidewalks up to the building there, that are done as well. And then, once that steel kinda gets filled in there, west of the auditorium, we'll be working on doing the greenhouse right there in that courtyard looking space. Also, when you're looking at this, you can kind of see on this north half closest to town, I guess, is the roof is done. And really, I was walking around on this afternoon, and a lot of walls are in. So I mean, once we get the rest of this enclosed, the auditorium, PAC, and the commons, it's really gonna go pretty quick because those are big open spaces. Every other place that's under a roof has steel studs standing pretty much, and really a lot of their work is complete. And overhead roughing is going great. If you go back in by the mechanical rooms, back by the loading dock, it's just clogged with piping, and you know, it's just organized, but it's just busy. So there's a lot of work that's happening, kind of, you know, behind the scenes, things that's going to get covered up, but paving the way for some drywall, which actually, you know, we've been doing drywall for quite a few weeks, just kind of topping out walls. That's what we do first, is top out walls so that ductwork and things can be put in hallways. But now we're starting to drywall the bottoms of walls. So, you know, once that happens, drywall mud starts coming in. We do have some dehumidification kind of stationed and ready to go in the building. So when it gets too humid and the drywall mud isn't drying, we're ready to go with that. So it's going to turn to finishes pretty darn quick here on the second floor, south half, and then just progress as we go. So, and if you'd just like to go around the rest of the way, go right ahead. I think that was pretty much it. Some other kind of keynotes that I didn't hit on. The retaining wall work down by the baseball fields has started. That's going well. We are eyeing up enclosure, I'd say mid-August right now is our plan. And like I said, the areas that don't have a roof over them, you know, are wide open areas, which, you know, is good. A lot of the area that has a lot of studs and a lot of overhead and everything is under roof right now we're working on. Any questions on that?
We'll get an update on the street and lift station, where that's at.
I don't know any factual information, just hearsay, I guess. So I don't know if I should talk to it.
They're out for bid, as far as the streets are out for bid. I believe actually, one of the street parts, or maybe even, has been awarded. And so that's pretty much what I'm aware of.
For the two projects, of course, what's going on with the city, which you were mentioning, I think H. James and Sons, does that sound right there? They were awarded that work, and I believe, getting underway.
The timeline this summer, fall.
Yeah, for both. For the north half, so like where the site entrance is, I can't speak to if this is on schedule or anything, but the plan and the way it was bid out was everything north of the entrance to our site that you see right now, all the way out to, what is that, 6th Avenue? By the jail? All that, oh, 6th Street, yep, all that would be done this year, and then flop and do everything from our entrance to the south and that roundabout down by the beverage mart next summer. That's the city project, and then the other project is the BNS project with that private drive and the development to the north. I do know Fairgram is working on engineering, exactly where that lands and where materials are for the lift station. I don't know, but in my opinion, it's getting pretty tight.
Yeah, I know it's purple, but maybe you might have an idea. This street coming right into the high school, that will be a city street, correct?
They'll be constructing it, at least the last I knew, the plan was they'll be constructing it, but it'll be at city specs.
Right, yeah. BNS.
But it will be a public city.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. That whole neighborhood will be.
Mhm.
So where's the second street you're talking about?
So the first street that I'm talking about with the city kind of follows what you see already. You know, it goes out to down to that water station, I want to call it, and there's gonna be like a little turnaround loop there. So not really changes as far as the city's work, but BNS's property kind of cuts across, kitty cornered across that green space just north of Northside Elementary, kind of diagonals to the high school, kind of scoots right past those big piles of stone, and kind of shoots into that northwest corner of the site, which is the bottom right corner on the screen here. So kind of there's an intersection there where the street that goes north and south right now, and the other street that comes through.
So which one is gonna be done first?
I don't know that they're supposed to both be happening this
Yeah, so there's two parts of it. So there's the city street, as if you think of the street as it exists right now, 31st and then down past the north side. The city is gonna do, the north part of it first, and then they're gonna do the south part of it second. At the same time, BNS is hoping to start work on their street that will go up and around the well through the north side property across, and then back up and into and join our property.
So that driveway going in then off of, I think it's 32nd Street, where the curve is by north side there, that would be just north of the buildings that are there then? Where the gravel piles, two big gravel piles, and then there's a barn and house, it would be just to the north side of that then, I'm assuming?
Yep, basically that road heads from northwest to southeast at a diagonal. It doesn't go true north, south, or east, and west.
Okay.
Yep, so it kind of goes from northwest to southeast.
Okay.
It'll cross about halfway between like the well and like the lower drive for north side and then
Okay.
angle up.
Are the sewer lines all to the lift station where it's gonna be?
Well, the sewer lines right now, that's part of the thing we need to keep a close eye on here. Our sewer lines are across the property line right now, which is all we are required to do as a part of this project right now. They are stuck to a point where then BNS Properties project takes them from there and takes them to the lift station. So right now, we're gonna have, I think the plan is December, I believe, is when that lift station will be installed by, so.
So it'll be on the north side of the
Yep.
property,
Yep.
the high school.
So 8.5 Street, I think we're still like 10 feet past the north side of 8.5 Street right now.
So this project has done everything it's supposed to do and is on time to the adjacent project, would be the BNS to tie in. So we've done everything that we've done with agreements and with the physical infrastructure. And so,
What remedy do we have contractually if they start to fall behind on those agreements with the lift station?
that's a great question. I was not a part of those agreements, so I don't know what we have as a remedy built into the
I
contract.
believe Carl said in on those. I'd have to go back and pull the contracts themselves.
Yeah, we can definitely, we have the contracts, we can review them.
I think I heard you say you were starting to get concerned.
Well, a little bit. I mean, I know they're all working on it. You know, I talked to the engineer, at least one of the engineers on the firm there, and I know they're actively working on it, and it could still be fine. It's just one of those things, just like our site work.
Project managers get paid to be concerned.
Exactly.
We've heard from every party involved,
Yeah.
from city, BNS, like everyone is motivated to get this moving. It's just a matter of actually
Yeah.
effectively getting the work done, which
Exactly.
No one's
unfortunately
sleeping
takes
on
time.
it, and it's brought up every week.
Yep.
I think it would just make us all a lot more comfortable if we saw physical work happening on site. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Good questions.
What are the green spots? They're the green buildings on the roof. Are those for mechanicals or?
So on the far roof over there, that's the mechanical mezzanine for the gym. So what's inside of that space is pretty much all the mechanicals that service the gym itself. There's some air handler units in there.
It's not the press box.
Nope. Press box
Yeah,
is
so
in
no, but that's a good question, because that was one of the discussions that came up, during the design and some of the cost-saving measures was, do you go with just exterior roof units and save some dollars versus they're actually called, what's the correct term for them that they are? They're a little penthouse, right?
Yeah.
And so that they have some enclosure to them, and it was decided that the cost differential wasn't that great, that it was better long-term to have them enclosed.
It was cheaper to put them in a penthouse than it was into the footprint of the building and expand the footprint of the building. But for longevity and maintenance of the units themselves, it was a better decision to put them enclosed. So it was a cheaper cost per square foot to build a penthouse on the roof than it was to expand the footprint of the building to account for them. You good?
All right, yeah, I'm good if there's no further questions.
Any more questions for Tony? All right, I can can jump in. Thank you for doing that. You beat me to it. I'll cut through this pretty quickly and then we can talk. Currently, we're at 35% complete for the high school construction project. We're 39% complete for the whole referendum, including Abe Lincoln. And currently, CG Schmidt's scorecard, safety scorecard, is at 97, so they're doing great. Owner contingency, again, the top number is what we had budgeted at the beginning of the project. The second number is what's remaining for the remainder of the project. And if we jump to the box directly below that, we're averaging an owner contingency spend of almost $36,000 a month. And that expenditure, if you project it flat, straight line to the end of the project, we would have spent almost $61,000 out of the 1.5 million. So we're doing great there also.
Ryan, just a quick, so
Yep.
just for myself and the board, is
Yeah.
that pretty typical in terms of what you would see for that rate at this point in the project, or is that better, worse?
I would say we're doing great.
Okay.
It's hard to say what's typical,
Sure.
because every project is like a fingerprint. Everything's really different on every project, but we're doing great. I would say, yeah, thank you for that. We're in a really good spot, and I'm very comfortable and happy with the spot that we're in. Since we met last, which has been a minute, we've had a couple change orders go through. There's change order 8, which is not accounted for because it was constitutive savings and some funds transferred. And I can let Tony talk about that in a second because we agreed that that's how that was going to happen. And then, but I will talk about change order number 9 because that was a cost to the project. Change order 9 consisted of construction bulletin number 9 and a couple other miscellaneous things. Exterior signage is one, and so that is the infrastructure for the monument sign that's going out kind of where the new road is coming in that we were just talking about. There's going to be a pretty robust monument sign with a digital screen, so whatever you want to put on that can be out there. And then we are adding, I think we've talked about this, at the entrance to the football complex, the concourse area out there as you walk up from the parking lot that we just saw that has binder course. There's going to be a walk up there, and there's going to be a big arch there, and paying homage to the current high school. So that is encompassed. That cost was encompassed in this. And then we upgraded the lockers in the locker rooms. We changed the color. It was a flat gray color, pretty uninspired. And so we went with a red because we thought that was great. It's pretty low buy up on that one, so we thought that would be a better one. Out of that $164,000 and change of that change order, only $70,453 hit the owner contingency because we had some line items already budgeted that would account for some of those things. And so I pulled funds from those line items to help fund that. And what was left over was the $70,000. That is all caught here in our burn rate, so that's already calculated in. So we're still, even with this, we're doing great. But some of those are Musco pole bases. Musco are the lighting that would be at the stadiums. We have some light bases that are for potential future upgrades to the baseball complex. And we went ahead and moved forward with adding those in now because of some sequencing and asphalt and things like that that made a lot of sense to put them in now. Been much more expensive later.
Just the bases though.
And just the bases, not the actual lights. And so, but we are prepped. We will be prepped at the end of this as best as we can for future lighting for the baseball complex.
Right, is electrical run to those bases also then? Or
The
is it
conduit will be run.
vicinity conduit?
Yeah, conduit, and then we will have capacity for those lights in the future within our service. So we will be ready to go if the funds were to be available for that. That's change order number 9. Change order number 8, like I said, represents some savings, and it also represents some transfer of funds, and I can let Tony talk about that.
Yeah, it's a net deduct total of $326,000 really. It breaks down into 3 different items. The majority of it is the branding and signage. So there are 3 allocations in our GMP. We had an allowance for about $70,000 for just signage. We did have one quote for that, but then, and then there was, and all this was moved from the construction budget to the soft cost budget because of the branding that was taken care of from that budget. So the scope is just shifting out of our GMP and into the branding scope. So, like I said, that allowance, there was a bunch of wall protection that had some logos on it that was in the commons, so that got removed from our scope. Be done by branding, and then there's a painting logo, a logo that was painted that branding is also gonna take on. So that kinda sums up to about $184,000 worth of work that's coming out of our scope and going into theirs. There's a small item that we were carrying for a UTV budget. The plan was, we'd buy a UTV, use it for a little bit and turn it over. We didn't see the need for that. We've been borrowing Huff McDeal's UTV on an as-needed basis.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So that's been working out okay, so we just decided it's time to just get that $20,000 out of our GMP and let it go back in to the soft cost budget. And then lastly, it was about $122,000 savings for a track surfacing product change. So this is something we identified really early on in construction about going from a pancake track system to a surface structural spray system. So, you know, this was brought up and talked about with engineering early on. It was just kind of one of those things let's wait later and make a decision on. So as we're planning for it, we brought it back to the surface here at meetings a few weeks ago, and ultimately the team decided to take the savings. A lot of spaces, a lot of tracks around this area and in Wisconsin really get structural spray tracks. The pancake system is kind of like a added performance, top level type of track. You know, that's the difference. By doing this, you're not getting anything that's less competitive with the communities around you or anything like that. It's just another way of skinning the cat, I guess, and doing it more cost
And we
effective.
more often see the structural spray on tracks than we do the pancake system, and that's usually because of cost. So,
Is a lower maintenance, long-term spray on versus.
A little bit. So the spray-on's a little bit more maintenance long-term just because of the product, but not significantly.
Okay, any questions about that? All right, I just want to point out a few things on the budget. The next page that we have, you will see a few things change if you have eagle eyes. Down in the owner direct category, you'll see two blank lines, which is signage interior and signage exterior. That accounts for two things. One, the exterior signage I mentioned before that I took money out of those line items to help cover that change order. And two, the overall moving some of these efforts to the branding team. And the reason being is we want a cohesive effort across the board. So we want our signage and our branding, more traditional branding components, all to kind of speak the same design language. And so we've moved a lot of those efforts into their line items. So if you can move your way down that same category, you will see environmental branding about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way down. That says $307,532. That number used to be $100,000 for their budget, so we've ballooned their budget out of other sources. And the reason why is because we've given them a lot more scope to do. So it's all falling under their umbrella to manage a lot of these signage efforts, again, so that it's cohesive. So the overall number has not changed, it's just moved buckets. And so what I'll probably do in the future is minimize the two empty lines. They're no longer there since it will be captured in the environmental branding. A couple things else to note is down below, if you look in the funding sources, I have two blank lines. Awesome news about community partnership investment. Currently, all funds, as Joe was talking about, that have been garnered have been for all the things he said, maintenance, long-term replacements, all of those type of things. If a community partner did want to invest in something that could affect the budget of the job, say they wanted to, just because we were talking about it, buy lights for the baseball complex. I'm leaving this here as blank just in case that were to happen, specifically to affect the project budget. And if that were, I would represent those funds there. So currently it is blank because all of these funds are outside of the project now and more for maintenance. The other one is Focus on Energy. We know that we're going to get funds from Focus on Energy, north of $100,000, but they are reimbursement funds. So currently, I'm not counting them within the budget because they will come after the project is complete. Now, they can come and reimburse costs that we have. That's kind of the intent of them. But time-wise, they will come a little bit late, so I'm not accounting for them at the moment. And so I'm leaving that line blank. If we would need to account for that and figure out a methodology to forward some funds into the project and be reimbursed from them, we can do that later, but right now, we don't need to do that. And then the delta down there shows the current project surplus, and so, which is about $874,000. I'll stop there and ask if you have any questions about the budget in general.
The suggestion, maybe those items that you blanked out, if, to clean it up, if you left the original amounts in the left column and then zeroed out the right column, it should all add up and then would make more sense, I think.
I can do that, but the numbers now live in a lower item, so, I mean, I can do it because I can just change my totals at the end and.
Well, it's the same thing with the lower item, though. You leave it low to start with, and then you show the increase.
I can, okay, I can. What I'm trying to avoid is show them as change orders, is because then they would try to tally in this thing as a percentage change of the overall, showing that we have a delta, and it will try to pull from the owner's contingency. So the kind of creative way I've done it to not pull from the owner's contingency is do it this way. But I can show it whatever way you guys want. I'll just have to do a little bit of looping around in the spreadsheet to make it work, but it's not a big deal to me if you feel like that would make more sense to you. That's more of a functional issue of my spreadsheet than it is the math of it all. So, well, I guess the delta is probably the segue to the next part. So, like I said, about $874,000 of remaining funds. We are, if you read the memo, I hope you did, is that the project team, which would be the district administration, ourselves, we are recommending that we increase the furniture budget by $650,000 from that surplus. We knew from the very beginning, and this is in the memo, but that this number was very, very, very anemic when we went out to budget on it, but it was the item that is most easily added to later in the game. So that's why we pulled those dollars out of that. We had a Herculean effort at the beginning of this project to make sure that this project was within budget. We did a lot of work to get there. And so dollar amounts had to be pulled out of certain things. One line item that took the biggest hit was furniture, intentionally so. Not because furniture is not paramount, but because, like I said, furniture can be added later in the game. And so the hopes were we would find an established savings throughout the project, which would allow us to add funds throughout the life cycle of the project back into furniture, which we've done. But also, fortunately, we have more revenue within the project, more equity in the project than we thought we were going to with the bond interest income. So with that, after lots of design meetings, lots of stakeholder input, lots of work with the school, with Jeremy and his team and his teachers and the departments, with PRA, with DIMCO, we have come to a design that we feel like is the most flexible, the most durable, the best for the student experience, right? And so we make the recommendation that we would add a portion of our surplus funds into the furniture budget as the highest and best use of those funds. I'll pause there and ask if you have questions or clarifications.
I guess I have a couple. First of all, on the funding sources, sign, can you remind us what that 50,000 is?
That's money in an activity account that, boy, that dates back to the Mark Brandt era of the high school. We're, with different fundraisers and/or graduating classes have donated monies with the intent that they were going to get a sign for the high school, mainly a video sign. And so with the new high school, we're finally going to be completing that. And so they had set dollars aside that would be going toward
So
that.
that's money in hand then?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the bond interest income, we have 8.5 million budgeted. Where, I mean, these funds will be point scale, but they'll stay invested, I guess is the question for you, Ron. Is that 8.5 a finite final number?
No, it's not a finite final number. Actually, we likely will have more interest revenue than that. However, as we've talked in the past, and we'll be getting that updated as we get closer to the end of the project, the IRS regulations only allow you to make so much interest revenue on the project, right? And if you don't hit certain deadlines and certain spend downs, which with the delay on our project, there was no way we were going to ever make those. If you make, quote, too much interest revenue, you have to then pay that back, that arbitrage back as a rebate back to the IRS. Because they don't want you borrowing money just to make money, right? And so that is right now what the calculated net is of what are interest incomes over the lifetime of this project versus what we likely will have to pay back.
Yeah.
If you recall, even right at the first, in our first 6 months, when we only had the bond anticipation note, we had to cut a check back to the IRS at the end of that 6-month period. And then that opened up the window for the full bonding, which we're building and constructing the building out.
So the IRS will have naming rights.
We'll check into that.
But
We
no,
haven't explored that
the
option
hope
yet.
is that we've looked at this conservatively, and if anything, that the number might get better. Now, the difficult part is it's not going to get a ton better, because of the limitations to what we can do. But as you recall, we did go out and get some, we went out and actually purchased some bonds, for some other projects that were tax exempt bonds. And so they're at a little lower interest rate, but then because they're tax exempt bonds, that revenue doesn't count against our rebate arbitrage amount. And so, there's been things we've been actively trying to do throughout the project so that we maximize. What you don't want to do is just let the money sit there and not do something. You want to earn as much as you can and then let the accountants try and, get you as good of a discount or, that as they can as they calculate out what has to go back to the IRS.
The 8.5 is probably a pretty solid number to work with as we think about.
Yeah. It may go up a little bit, and so that's kind of where, as Ryan said, going back to, to Ryan's credit, when we built this furniture budget, Ryan's original number was pretty close to what we're talking about right now. And I know PRA said, well, they'd had some projects that came in a little less, and so we had shifted some of those. But as Tony or Ryan said earlier about something else in the project, how each project kind of has its own life and signature. And so if you look at ours, we don't have a lot of built-ins. There's not built-in cupboards and like the standard classrooms and stuff like that. So you then need to buy storage furniture, right? And so suddenly you need dollars in the furniture budget. That may be a different project where they have all built-ins, which is part of Tony's cabinetry budget, doesn't need as much furniture. And so all that interplay happens, and as Ryan was pointed out, you pull money from that line item because it's the easiest line item to add later. Another area that comes into play is the lighting. We talked about putting in the Musco bases. If our bond interest income does come out a little better, that's one of those things that at the end of the project, the board can look at it and say, yep, we put in the infrastructure. Now, if we do have some extra dollars, we can consider putting in the lights themselves.
Just help me understand what we're talking about here, because did we sign a contract with the furniture design company already? And we've got whatever package was designed originally is approved, is contracted, they've got to provide that furniture at that price, and now we're looking to upgrade? Or is this a budget line item that we missed the budget and now we need more funds to cover the gap?
No, more to the first. We didn't have a design attached to our original contract. We had a budget, so the design had not happened. Per the memo, DIMCO did come to us with a package that was designed to budget. And the team stated here, the district administration, PRA, and HKP, ourselves, all looked at that and said, that design though it meets the base needs, don't meet the needs and desires of what we feel like the most forward-thinking view of what the furniture needs are of the school. And so, and I said, I mean, my number was 1.85 million when we put the budget together originally. We're asking basically for 1.9 million. And so when we put 1.25 million, I had a problem with it the whole time, but we didn't have a choice. We had that's the choice that we had to have. And so they could outfit this for 1.25 million. It would be a dramatically different school if we did that. And so after having demo classrooms that they had, the students and teachers have worked through, giving different department input, and like I said, numerous design sessions, it has come out that what we feel like the true needs and true desires of the school moving forward, to make them the most flexible spaces, the most forward-thinking spaces, and give it the longest runway of durability. We feel like this is the best budget for the project.
Right, I think that's right. A question I have, it's part of, because it's a pretty good chunk of money, and, you know, and I understand why we're talking about it, but you think the furniture is, with the upgrade, is it longer lasting, more durable? I mean,
Yeah.
beyond just colors and looks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think as we move forward into this, the grade of furniture has increased. I guess I keep saying the word flexibility, but the ability to learning spaces to be moved and adjusted and put together in meaningful ways has increased. The Commons is a dramatically different space with the variety of furniture and seating and colors and durability and all of the things we're talking about. Teachers have more storage in their classrooms, quite a bit more. What was that, Joe?
Just general comfort issues, like, you know, instead of the four-post chair, you have the sled chairs that have a little
Yep.
more of a bounce to them and lean back a bit more.
Yep. It's not one silver bullet here that got us to an increase. It's a lot of kind of buy-ups, I guess, if you were across many spectrums and many spaces. But it puts it more on par and on standard to what I would see other modern school projects that we are completing today. And so that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, to the credit of our high school staff, I think, as they've evaluated furniture and looked at them, you know, they weren't tasked with, yep, we need to keep it a number, but they know, you know, they work in education. They know that, you know, numbers are tight always. And so they've also made some good decisions as to, yep, we don't need a piece of furniture that can do every cool thing under the sun. We just want what is really good and functional for our classroom, good bang for the buck versus the lowest end possible to hit a number, right? And so, you know, and part of it's pushback from, you know, myself and Jeremy, right? When you start saying, all right, you're an English classroom, you know, you have books, right? We need to have some bookshelves and storage for those books, you know? We live in Wisconsin, for whether it be a male or female teacher, but I especially think of female teachers, right? Where you need someplace to hang your coat, hang your purse, whatever, right? And so if you don't have a wardrobe in your classroom, suddenly that all becomes difficult. And so those are the types of things when you don't have built-ins that you better be thinking about as you're outfitting those rooms with furniture.
Ryan, can I just ask? And maybe this is part for you, Ryan, and part for you, Ron, but, so what we're talking about is using our owner contingency.
No.
No.
That's not what we're talking
No, it would not affect owner contingency.
So you have that delta down at the very bottom of your spreadsheet that says, right now, our expected revenues are more than what our expected costs are. And so that would get applied to furniture.
Yeah, that's just unallocated funds. That's not technically in a contingency. It's not living in, it's kind of in limbo. It's just unallocated funds.
So then procedurally, for the board tonight, is this informational to kind of get our reaction, or is this an item that we need to take action on?
I think Demco will be at some point coming back with their final design plan, so I think, you know, we can bring it back as an action item, I think, at the next board meeting, and then, that way we can make sure that we have that solidified and ready to roll. But I think Ryan really needs to know, so that we can finalize that plan with Demco. Are we thinking we're okay with it? And, you know, are we feeling, you know, and if we're not, then we have to have probably a bigger discussion tonight.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, you know, I get it, I mean, I think it's dollars well spent. Right now, we've got 847,000, and we, you know, bam, 650's gone for good reasons. And so, do we anticipate any other big ticket items? Best guess.
I am not, and personally, I'm not anticipating any items other than what we've talked about, unless there's a project enrichment, say like adding lights to the baseball, or fill in the blank turf to the baseball. Just some of the things that have been conversations with public partnerships with the community. If say, someone in the public did not latch on to one of these, and then, at the end of the project or towards the end, we have a better picture of what we have left as a surplus, and then the board thinks it's a good idea to move on one of those. That's the type of items that I would expect on here, and I look at this as the same type of item. We're not allocating this as project funds right now. It's just, that's why it's not been moved into the contingency. It is just looked at as a surplus. So I have nothing on my radar other than what I've just mentioned.
And to be clear, for those of you who've been here, you've lived it. For those of you who are new, you haven't. You know, we've done, you know, 3 other buildings so far with renovations with C.G. Schmidt. They also have a construction contingency line, and every end of every one of those projects, we've had construction contingency dollars that we've had to decide how we were going to utilize them and what we were gonna potentially add to the project with it. And so I'm anticipating when we get to the end of this project, between the owner contingency, the construction contingency, and any dollars that may remain in that unallocated and or that additional revenues that come from interest income, that there will be dollars at the end of this project that we'll be talking about. And so I think the reason they're talking now, though, with Demco is we need to get a furniture bid in, as far as a furniture order in, sometime in the near future, to make sure that the furniture is here when we need it to move into the building. And so that's why we're talking furniture now and not next June.
So Ryan, I mean, the burn rate, straight line, owner contingency looks like under 900,000 in a project. So that should leave about 600,000 in owner contingency then. I support the upgrade.
I do too. I can say that when I was at the convention in Milwaukee, we were at the Demco booth and we saw some of the furniture that they had, and we saw, and I said, specifically, is this what we're getting? And she's like, well, no, you're over here. And it's like, oh, I'm glad to hear this is more durable, because what I saw that we were going to be getting, I could see we were gonna be replacing it in a few years. I mean, things are already gonna start to get damaged, and I'm glad to hear that if we have some money, that's where we're gonna put it, because I think we need to do from the beginning. I know why we did what we did, where we had to come in, but I'm glad to hear, and I would support it.
And this upgrade will, I think as Ron alluded to, it'll give like a place for teachers to hang up their jackets and build personal space.
Yeah, I would say that probably, and Joe, you can speak to this too, a lot of the feedback from like the baseline design of a given classroom was, where's the storage? What are your comments about this? Can I have more storage? And we all know any building that humans occupy, it always wants and needs more storage. And so I would say these buy-ups are buying, in my opinion, what this project needs and not everything that this project wants. And I think the places that need to be high functioning, high flexibility, and to be quite frank, impressive, like the Commons, are going to be. When you walk in, if you look at the furniture layout in the 3D model that they've built, it's impressive and it's highly functional and it's highly flexible. And so I think one more component would be, or one more area just to highlight, is the launch area. The baseline was a big room with a little bit of furniture in it, and what was anticipated was more like a professional co-work space. And so what the design that we feel like that room needs is not a lavish co-work space, but a professional, high-functioning co-working space that people would come into and have the flexibility to do work as teams, work as individuals, all types of things. I think that that's what Launch wants to be. And so there's a handful of those stories throughout the building that this effort supports turning this into. And I will say again, this brings it on par with what I see, and that's why my budget was the number it was when we started this, on what we see on current projects.
Love to get reactions from other board members before we kind of wrap this up.
So I definitely, I understand, I appreciate the explanation, I understand the need. I don't really like the surprise, and that might be my own fault, because I, unlike Nikki, didn't know the grade furniture. I hadn't had the opportunity to see that, so 50% budget increase because we were trying to cut early to bit in line is surprising to me. I want to be absolutely sure that we're looking at every other thing. I didn't realize we were cutting that deep in certain places.
Yeah, it's been an ongoing project conversation, and I apologize if that hasn't bubbled to the board in normal conversation. It was a heavy effort at the early days to get this in line, and which we have, and we've done it without cutting any required referendum scope, which I'm really proud of the team. But yes, this has been the one. This has been the one that we've known about, and again, I'll just apologize and follow my sword on that one, that you guys didn't have the clarity on this line item as maybe the project team did. That we were very hopeful and optimistic that we'd be able to add funds to it.
Well, and I'll jump in on that if that's something that I should have communicated. I will say I have a unique perspective not being in the early part of this process, jumping in the middle of it, kind of learning a lot in a short amount of time. I just want to say it was very clear from the start that this budget line item was one that was an area of concern going forward. From day one, it's been identified as, we got a number that we can make work, but it is in no way, shape, or form close to what we believe is going to be necessary to do this project the right way. So I don't want Ryan taking all of
This
it.
goes back to 2 years ago, right? Before we started bid package one, before we put anything out where we had to look and say, okay, what do we need to do to get this to work? And if you recall, there was meetings with, that's why we brought the electrical team on board. That's why we brought the HVAC team on board. That's why we brought all those subs on early, was to say, okay, how can we find some efficiencies to make this still be a great building, but to make this budget work? And so it was during all of that process when this happened.
Yeah, I do appreciate you taking, that wasn't what I was looking for, is to find out, Graham, I just wanted more, like, what else? Is there something else that is out there that we're not
We have not
quite
cut the
aware
throat
of
of
that?
anything else. I will say a lot of the other effort, to be honest, doesn't live in the soft costs, lives in the hard costs. So a lot of that effort was some of mechanical penthouses. We talked about that, getting that out of the footprint and getting it up on the roof. That's one component. Precast walls instead of more traditional cold form stud wall. Some of those things are how we got to the solutions. And this was the big one of the soft costs that got us to the solution. I think the other one is, I traditionally would have probably carried a little bit more owner contingency than what we have. But we're doing great, so I'm not concerned about it, but we knew that we couldn't carry maybe all the owner contingency that I would say by default because of the budget. But it has not been a problem, which has been amazing. Those are the ones that we really, on the soft costs, that kind of took the brunt of it.
Is there any furniture from the school that's coming over?
There's a little bit of back of house type stuff that, so not not in the classrooms, not, student function. But there's some storage, there's some of those type of things. Trying to do our best not to do that, and the main reason being, in Ron's words, there's no way quicker to make a new school look old than fill it with 50-year-old furniture. And so we've tried to be prudent. We did a large-scale evaluation of all the furniture that is in this current school and gave it a grading system, A, B, C, D, I think. And that was a pretty big effort by multiple parties. And so we do have a catalog of all the current furniture and the grade in which it received. So really the only furniture that we're considering bringing over is the higher grade furniture and more in a storage capacity for back of house spaces.
Yeah, we only have probably a couple of areas where we're, you know, quote, excited enough to really want to bring it. But then on the other side, on the flip side is, you know, we have some really great, like, stuff in the fitness area that we're gonna be able to bring that we, from when we had the PEP grant, right? And so that's oftentimes a very high dollar area. And so we have a lot of stuff that's gonna go into the fitness weight room area that'll, you know, be moved over. In the kitchen area, we have a lot of new stuff, but we also have a lot of stuff that we just upgraded in the last few years out of the Fund 50 budget. And so we're bringing those things over. So there are those pieces, even in the commons, right? If you go into our current M room, we have a handful of logoed tables. Logoed, brand new logoed cafeteria tables are gonna look just like those logoed cafeteria tables, so we're bringing those with us, right? And so there are things that, when they make sense, that we're bringing over.
And I will say, a big win is that because of, especially with the fitness and weight room, all the things we could bring over, we really beat that budget. What I was anticipating for our costs there, we beat it by about, I think currently almost 20%.
CTE as well, didn't we have some savings due to the grant work?
Yeah. So with the grant and with existing equipment that's in good shape, that we can bring over, CTE equipment as a whole bucket is way ahead of budget, so.
I have two other questions, general questions, and I don't want to segue now. Jim said you're trying to straw poll. Sorry.
I am trying to straw poll. Go ahead with your questions.
Well, I was just kind of curious. First of all, the scoreboard from the football field, that will come too.
Yes, it will.
And,
As well as from the basketball,
yeah,
main basketball court.
and this is a really small item. Hate to even bring it up, but I've had a number of people over the years where it says Monroe Cheesemakers across the top, if we had a background on that, so it was more visible. Anyway, something to think about.
For the football?
The football scoreboard. And then I was just curious on the branding, generally who's involved in that?
Yeah. So from a vendor standpoint, it's PRA, which is the architect of record, and it's a group called Amplify, and they're working in tandem with each other. And then within like the school-based decision-making or review, we, Joe and Ron and Jeremy and ourselves, and who else is in those meetings that I'm not getting?
Right, ours is, Rich is in them.
Rich is in there, yeah. And so as we look at specific spaces, we get tailored input because of their impact of that. And then some of that has rolled into community sponsorships components. So that's been really great. And it's a fun effort because that combination of PRA and Amplify are very creative and very talented, and they're getting very dialed into like the ethos of Monroe, of the school district, of the high school specifically. They're really dialing it into some really great concepts.
Brianna and Russ were both at the community input meeting, and not that we had a wealth of community people there, but they both sat in on those groups and heard a lot of those conversations. And so when we talk about some of the cheese-making history and the arch and capturing all those ideas and concepts, they've kind of been embedded in, you know, looking at that. And they also, for Russ, to his credit, I mean, digging through archives of our community and our school, and then he's like, what about this? Is this important to you guys? Or is, and so, he's done a lot of work in that area, so it's.
With district staff involved. It's been quite a while, but I think we saw some initial branding thoughts. As those kind of evolve, maybe they can
Yeah.
be sent to the board.
Yeah, I think they're still about, probably a meeting or two from bringing it back to you guys, but they're getting through some of it.
Couple things they want to accomplish is, kind of taking big ideas and making them very specific. And then, currently the renderings that we're like reviewing these under are kind of generic. And they want to dial the renders to specific locations in the school, so we like it on a big white wall, but is that our big white wall? And does it look good in that exact space? So those are some of the next steps involved in the brand.
I mean, I'd probably speak for all the board members, but the look of the school is kind of the cool part. And
Yeah.
so I think maybe we would all like to kind of see that as it evolves.
Yeah, I would just, to Ryan's point, I think we're trying to get a lot of it cleaned up so we don't get here and you're like, wait a second, why are there mice all over the school in terms of the representation of the cheesemaker? So we worked through some of those things, we're cleaning it up. As Ryan said, I would anticipate that, in the near future, we're gonna have some renderings to share that quite confident that you'll be proud of.
Yeah, they're great. They're really, that's, the problem is when they first open the deck, like, tell us what you love and what you hate, and the problem is, most of it's like, oh, that's great, and that's great, oh, and that's great. Like, you don't hate a lot of it, but then you have to really put the effort in to dial it in, so.
And we haven't got to the granular level of like, what does the classroom identifying sign look like? That's something that they'll also be working on.
Thanks, good questions, Phil.
Yeah, I'm out of my time now.
Yeah. Shut them down.
So to make sure Ryan's getting the feedback he needs, so there's no surprises if we bring a Demco budget back, any other cries of outrage or feedback from board members on the $650,000 to furniture budget add?
And I will follow up and say what we can bring back is the actual dialed in budget and the per dollar, like the actual dollar increase. 650, we're seeing it as encompasses what the budget would be, and we'll dial that in, and then we can bring that back maybe as an actionable item once we know. what
Yeah,
it
and I
is.
assume you can then share some of the DIMCO renderings of what spaces look like.
Yep, and we potentially at that point, I'll take the direction of the board, but we could even maybe, if it gets approved, then maybe Demco would come in and do a quick pass through with a slide deck so that you guys can see some of the furniture choices and those type of things.
Helpful.
I have one question on the budget. You were talking about the branding. There's no cost in here for the signage in the interior or exterior.
Yeah, so that got rolled into, the lower line. It's about 3/4 of the way down that same section. That says environmental branding. It's between tech ed equipment and baseball scoreboards. That 307,532, that now encompasses, the interior and the exterior signage. Because it originally was not in their scope, but it was determined that it was best to be cohesive in the visuals of everything. So if we gave that scope to them, then it would all be, speak the same design language throughout the building, so.
I just didn't want another surprise.
Yeah, no, we've
You move signage interior, exterior down to that line item, right?
So you kind of led off with, right?
Yep.
Great. Mike, you good?
I'm good.
Nicole, any comments on this?
I like it. I mean, it's nice that Nikki was able to see what we were initially going to be getting versus what we can get that's going to last longer. It makes sense.
And I feel, I agree with where folks are headed here, and also just appreciate, kind of a surprise for me, which is my own fault, that I didn't realize we had 874 outside of the owner contingency that was in the green right now, so.
it's a really good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. Great. Any other questions for the team here before we move on?
Just one question that I would have, and we don't have to talk about it to extent right now, but safety-wise at the new high school, are there specific areas that are going to be different set up? I know you go around to a lot of the new schools right now, and hundreds of different ways, sectioning off and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just very curious as to what are we gonna have, what's in the plan, those kind of things. And we don't really have to cover it right now, but maybe put something together, you know, for the next time that we come.
Yeah, absolutely. We can have that discussion in more granular detail. If it's appropriate for this meeting, or if it's a sidebar and we can have.
Whatever, I'm just very curious as
Whatever.
to what that is going to be.
More than happy to have that conversation. I'll take the lead of Jim on how we handle that, but, yes, 100%. And it's been well, designed and thought out in regard, it was job number one, to be completely honest, when it came to design, so.
But we actually had talked about that in the beginning, I think, before you were on, that we actually don't want to have that complete detail so that someone knows all the protocols that have been, or all the measures of
Okay,
where we're most vulnerable too.
okay.
Um,
Yeah, good point.
So that's why it was very well thought out, but not necessarily discussed.
Okay.
But I do think it's well worth your knowledge, right? Like you to know, it's very important, and we can have, whatever that best means of having that, let's have it, for sure.
Bring that back next month.
Yeah, we can do that, and, like I said, I can do it, and I don't know what we need to do it with, to preserve what Nikki was saying, but, let's all talk it
I
through.
think there's some larger standard safety issues that are in the mix, like, you know, the
Overall-
secure entrance, things of that
overarching,
nature,
It
some of the
doesn't
film.
have to be extreme detail, I
Right.
understand that portion of it, but
Yep.
just
No, I,
for the comfort of my own self
Yeah.
and for anybody that's listening or watching
Yeah.
or, you know.
appreciate that question.
No, it's great, because it came out in the very beginning. So
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on. You guys are welcome to stay for the duration of the meeting if you want to.
Thanks, guys, for coming.
Yeah,
Take care, guys, thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that insult?
Just note, I put you up early on the agenda, so you didn't have to sit through the temporary operating budget discussion for 40 minutes. See you guys.
Thanks. All right, next up, informational item. We've got a activities and athletics report. We're gonna turn it over to Mr. Jubek.
Well, and while I, like you, could probably spend all night talking about furniture, I'm happy to transition to the student involvement here we have at MHS and all the different opportunities. And I believe I shared with Joe, and it sounds like it's up on your screen. So I just have a few slides, and then by all means, I'll pause for any questions that you may have. The first one, just kind of a general overview for all the sports that we offer. There's 25 sports, not all WIAA. A majority of them are. But I'll go into more details once we get into each of the seasons. I think that the asterisk for hockey for girls came earlier in the year at a meeting where it was an athlete had come to ask for that to be a sport. So I appreciate you guys getting that back on. And it looks like for next year, we're gonna have 2 girls that are playing in the co-op that's now gonna be in Janesville. But again, I'll go into more details later in the presentation. The next slide is something I'm real proud of. I think for a school of just over 700 students, we are extremely blessed for how many opportunities that we have for our students. I have this broken down. We have 31 activities, and this number is kind of fluid just because each year there are a handful based on kind of student needs and as well as the advisors, teachers that might have an interest in that leave, et cetera. But I've broken down into stipends so that these are paid, and then the non-stipend advisors is a combination of outside sources. Like an example would be Big Brothers Big Sisters, as well as some clubs that are volunteer, that the advisors are volunteer, not getting paid. So we have some really neat ones. So I'm happy to kind of pause on this point. We also have some very successful ones. We got our musical and play. We have huge numbers. They've been very successful. Our forensics is extremely impressive as well. It's also kind of neat to see that we have a couple of new ones on the right-hand side, the Dungeons and Dragons and the Anime Club. A goal for me, or something that I really value for this job, is to get as many kids involved as possible. So it's neat to see when some teachers have an idea to come and say, hey, I'm interested in starting this club. And say, hey, great, sounds good. At this point, there's no money available for it, but we'll help support you through that. So if there's any questions or anything about this slide.
Are the non-stipend, or is there a change to any of those, or has that always been? And the reason I ask is I thought the Key Club received one. The person that did that work for our Kiwanis group was amazing.
So we're clear on the stipend. It's not, that would not be district money. So there are a few other organizations, that, like some of the Big Brothers too, where they would come,
Okay.
like So Key Club by, or excuse me, the Key Club by the Esquanas, right?
Yes,
That was the-
yes,
the
that's what I
parent
was asking.
organization
Okay.
that would then provide. I think there's a couple on that side that are that same.
I think Junior
that same-
Optimus is similar,
Correct.
so
I
yeah,
think
okay,
it's
I
similar.
wanted to make sure.
Yep, so no money to the district, but still need to allow those advisors that spend a lot of time to have some outsourced
Yeah.
funding.
Okay.
Okay, moving on then. The next one, just kind of tying in the connection that we know that involved students are typically more successful students, just because, yes, it's important what they do in the classroom, but also to be involved. So this is kind of our 700 students, 297 different students are involved within these 31 activities with an average GPA of 3.42. Within the 665 total students, meaning that that there's a student that is involved in 8 activities. In fact, I believe it was actually your granddaughter. Was if you take that just kind of the weighted meaning, right? So hers would be 8 times more valuable, of course, because she's in 8 different activities. So we have a total of 665 students involved, if you look at it that way. And it's also impressive that we have 46 total staff that are involved within those different activities. And I'll just break down just briefly the seasons for the sports. So for the fall sports within those, these numbers are relatively consistent from the previous year. I think the numbers that are in football was 71 this past year, and I think we even have a handful more coming up for this upcoming school year. And we talked about adding a few JV2 level games to ensure that those kids have an opportunity, because with 71 it becomes tight. And in fact, boys soccer, we're having the same thing. We're looking to kind of schedule a few additional games to allow those opportunities for those kids to get some more playing time. All the rest of the numbers are kind of ebb and flow, but are pretty similar. If you see for girls swimming, that 18 number would describe the co-op, because we are with New Glarus, so that would mean there are 10 New Glarus girls, and then there are 8 Monroe students. And then you see that there, the fall and the spring, we have our most students involved in sports, so there's 250 that were involved in the fall sports. You can see it broken down by grade and by gender. This is the season that has the closest breakdown for gender for both boys and girls.
Eric, what would a girls tennis, what would that have been like 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, yeah, oh, for sure. It's impressive to see. I know that we were just speaking with Coach Borden here recently, saying that one of his, right before he took over, that the concern would be to get rid of the program because there weren't high enough numbers.
Sorry, we just talked about this at the, they were down to 3 players, I believe. So it was one of the players' dad pulled Bordner in just so that his son was a senior could finish his career. Otherwise, they were done.
Well, one thing I'm really excited for, I mean, that was just so cool to be these presentations to see the new school and follow that process, but for the sporting side of things and the theater, I mean, that performing arts center is going to be incredible. But seeing that tennis, one of the problems they have is there are only 4 courts at the high school. And there's 4 courts at Rec, and there's 3 at Northeast, and there's 2 at Twining. So it's just such a pain to try to navigate that whole system. So to be have it all in one location, it'll be great for, of course, all programs. I'm excited for tennis to be able to be at one spot.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the fall sports?
This was this current school year we just finished up, correct?
Correct.
Are we flipping where it's gonna be a lot more girls swimming, Monroe girls in the upcoming fall?
No, not that I know. We don't have, in fact, we have a big junior class of Monroe girls. So
Okay.
next year will be similar, and then I think it's gonna drop off from that, honestly. Our 6th through 8th grade current numbers that now, of course, you don't know which kid decides to come out. Because in fact, this number wasn't gonna even be 8. I think it was 4 or 5, and then there were 2 or a couple students that one changed from volleyball, another one decided to join last minute. So I think, but I think this is actually on the high side for the next handful of numbers, or excuse me, for the next handful of years.
Yeah, I think COVID kind of.
I will say cheer was cool to see cheer to be 11. That ended up being a really nice, we have a new cheer coach who did a really nice job to get numbers out. And this upcoming year, I think our numbers are even higher, but it was really cool to see 11 this last fall as well. Okay, winter. Winter's always a season that there's less sports, so therefore there's less involvement. So there's 116 total students that are involved, and as you can see these numbers here. One that the asterisk is with excuse me, that I mentioned that with girls hockey, but boys hockey, same as with swimming, that we are a co-op, but for this sport, we do have a majority of the athletes that are in Monroe, and that's 13 of the 21. But in that co-op, there are, I think, 5 or 6 other schools from the surrounding area, so it's not just from one other school area. And then one thing I'm looking forward to too is that one thing that we're really prioritizing is that girls wrestling is, I think what girls wrestling and lacrosse are the two fastest growing sports in our country right now. So we only had 2 this past season, but we know we have a handful of middle school kids coming out. We've been kind of working to be creatively finding ways to get more girls to be involved in wrestling because it's a great sport. We're looking forward to kind of getting those numbers where we'd like to see them. Any questions with that?
One question I would have on that, Eric, I know you mentioned lacrosse. Has there been any push for any of that?
No, it's
I
interesting.
mean, I didn't know anything about it until 3 years ago, and now it's probably my favorite.
Yeah, it's a cool sport, and I mean, the amount of athleticism that it takes is incredible. It's a tough sport, but it's also a challenge for a community our size.
That's what I was wondering.
Because even schools that would be, I think, I don't know if Mount Horeb does in Oregon, I think that they're kind of going towards it, but their concern is that when you take 15, 20, 25 kids from other sports, where are they gonna come from, and then what's that gonna do to their sports? So I'm intrigued with what the future looks like, because it is such a fast-growing sport. At this point, we're okay to not have it based on our numbers. Okay, and then in spring, similar numbers to the fall, 215 athletes. I think the biggest kind of interesting piece in this one is just that the gender disparity is quite sizable with 130 boys and 85 girls. It is interesting though, because we have a few sports that do have big numbers. Our softball numbers are quite sizable, and our boys tennis is huge. Our girls soccer numbers were a little smaller than have been in the past. We're talking about ways in which we can grow that. Yeah, that's spring sports. Any questions on spring sports? We had a really nice spring season. We had 4 of the IA teams, 5 took first, 2 took second in the conference. So we need to see the success we had in the first spring season. And the last one, is probably a slide that you've seen in the past, because I'm gonna try to kind of dig through some spreadsheets to pull that information to again showcase the importance of being involved in not just sport, but of course with activities as well. It just shows that if you were involved in a sport or an activity, you almost had a full point GPA higher than not being involved. And then for activities themselves, just an activity of the 297 students with that, it's also nice to see the high GPA. And essentially, the more involved a student is, the correlation for the GPA is there. That's my information. New to this, of course, my first year, really enjoyed the year. I wasn't really sure other information. If there's other stuff that you'd like to have in the future, I'm happy to provide any additional information or any other questions.
Do you happen to know offhand, speaking about GPAs here in this last slide, how many of the athletes did get like all-state honors for their academics?
Yeah, I'm not too sure that. I think that it's interesting because each sport's a little bit different in how they handle their all-state, right? So like a sport like cross country, I'm aware, where if your team makes it to state, you know, the 3.5 GPA, I believe it is, then you're all-state in that sport. So each one's kind of based on the success of the sport as well as their grade. So I honestly am not too sure about that.
I just feel like I see a lot,
Yeah.
a lot of it put out there, which is our students first.
Correct.
Thank you, Eric.
If there are no questions, I just want to say, like as Rick said, he's coming to a point where he's finishing out the year and newer to the job, but I can't tell you how many compliments I've gotten from people in the community about Eric Jubeck and his performance. And so earmuffing, I'm going to say nice things about you for a little bit, but Eric has taken that job and attacked it with a level of excitement, enthusiasm, passion that I think has been extremely well received in the community. He's constantly at various activities and not all athletics. He has a passion to make sure that all kids are represented in this work. This is one of those jobs that maybe you don't hear a lot about your AD unless there are things going wrong. And you guys need to know that Eric Jubeck's doing a heck of a job for our school, our kids, and our community. So thanks, Eric, for all you're doing.
I will totally echo that coming from the Booster Club side too. It's just been so fantastic to be able to work with him and have his involvement, and he's always in contact with us, helping us promote ourselves, and then just partnering with him has just been so fantastic. And we got to, throw some flamingos in his yard, so.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate you.
Maybe just as a transitional statement to our next topic, it's also been a tough budget year on the athletic side. On your first year as athletic director, to be able to navigate some of the tough budget waters, we really appreciate your leadership there. So, thank you, Eric. All right. We've got one last item, new business, approval of our temporary operating budget. And this is an action item. So we'll look to take action to approve the budget. We want to make sure everybody has the information you need to take that action. So turn it over to Ron Mason.
Yeah, so basically, what the temporary operating budget is we develop our budget that goes to the annual meeting, and the board reviews that in September. And then at the annual meeting, the community approves the first real budget that for the district for the year. But we have to have a temporary operating budget in place so that we can, expend monies throughout the summer up until we get those approvals at the annual meeting in October. It is temporary in the sense of it's the best picture of what the budget looks like right now. It's up to date as of the staffing, a lot of the places that we had in place at last month. Now, with that said, a lot of the new staff, I don't know what health insurance plan they're taking. Are they going to take single? Are they going to take family? Are they going to take none? So there's going to be a lot of moving parts over the summer with that. And we're also, obviously, as we discussed in the finance meeting, really waiting to see what happens with the state budget, because that drives what the majority of our revenues are. And so the latest we've ever seen that come in is early October. So I certainly hope it'll come in a little earlier this year. We know that last year when we did our early projection, going back to, actually it was the spring of 2024, and then we looked at it again in the fall of 2024, we knew we had to make some serious reductions. And so the board tasked administration to look at $1 million worth of reductions with the hope that we would hit about a $2.055 million deficit. Right now, we're not there, and there's some reasons for that. Some of it is our revenues have changed between the decrease in our fund balance as well as some of the decrease in interest rates. We reduced our budgeted interest income. We had $100,000 in our budget previously. We had a gift from Swiss County that was funding our elementary Spanish. That's going away. The good news is we have grant dollars coming in from GCDC. So that revenue line item stays the same, but where last year we didn't have any elementary Spanish staff to use that gift, so we didn't get the gift. Next year, we know that we're going to be adding a tech ed teacher with the dollars coming from GCDC. So what happens is you had the revenue last year budgeted, but it ended up not coming to fruition because we didn't have the elementary Spanish. However, we didn't have the expenditures either. This coming year, we don't have, quote, new revenues because that revenue budget line item is going to stay the same, but we will have the expenditures associated with the new staff member. Some of our minor grants were not reauthorized. Some of the, Get Kids Ahead and some of the other small ones that, were used to be tied to either some of the federal programs or to miscellaneous things. As of now, they've not been reallocated within the state budget that's coming out of the Joint Finance Committee, and so we assume some of those will be likely going away. And the other major factor was we knew we were going to be making a significant change to healthcare, but when we were looking at healthcare being about a 5% increase, those changes were actually probably going to, well, not probably, those changes were expected to actually save us dollars on our budget. Unfortunately, our renewal came back at 19.5%. And so we're still making significant changes to healthcare, probably even more significant than we originally looked at. But that's to keep us somewhat cost neutral there, so it's not eating up our whole budget. And so we're not going to see savings coming out of all those changes in the sense of, yep, it's going to lower our deficit, but it's going to offset that entire amount of increase and make sure that that line item isn't growing. We are going out to bid this spring, summer. Our health insurance renews January 1. And so there is some hope that it'll come down and it might be a little better, but I think that's going to be, getting back to that break even point will probably likely be the best case scenario for us. I had some notes in there in the cover about some of the state budget, and so we've talked about that a little bit in finance, and I've shared enough things with you. I'm not gonna jump into all those. There's not a lot of dollars came into the new state budget that we'd hoped for, and so I won't go into all those. Looking at some of the budget building docs, I'm gonna start with the one that says June temporary operating budget by function for Fund 10. So if you wanna open that one. We don't typically look at our revenues by function. We look at them by object, meaning what are they, not what are they for. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about the revenues by function, but if you scroll down to page 2 at the bottom, you will start to see the expenditures appearing. And they're really on page 3 is where they really pick up. And that far right column is the revised budget, meaning is what the title is, but it's really the percentage change. And so I'll point out a few of the big ones when we have them, but I also will be, a lot of times I'll be looking at where those breaks are. So if you start on the bottom of page 2 and you scroll down to the top of page 3, the total for the undifferentiated curriculum, which will show on your report as 10E, some dashes, and then 1-1 and a bunch of dashes. That is all elementary education. And so the total for all elementary education grew at 1.94%. And so one way we've done that is we've made the cuts in previous years. We don't have a lot of changes next year in the elementary area. We do have some staff changeovers, but that budget really isn't significantly growing. However, at 1.94%, it's certainly less than CPI, and some of that is because of some of the adjustments we've made. You go to the next big group of dollars, the 120s, 1,000 functions. That's all like your subject area. So it's your arts, it's your Englishes, it's your maths. And so really that typically applies to either specialty areas or when you talk about the middle and high school, the core areas. Meaning we look at it there not as 9th grade, but we look at it as these are math teachers, these are English teachers, these are social studies teachers. And so for all the 120,000, you see we actually have a reduction of 0.04%. And so all those costs for all those programs, nearly $8 million, didn't really change year over year because of some of the changes we made in the budget. When it comes to summer school, we made some changes in our summer school model and as well as our transportation. When you look at the German line, 122, 123, 209, that program has gone away. And so you see a few more significant outliers. You see in general music, where we are going to be splitting part of our music teacher. And it used to be split with library, but now it's going to be split even more. And so you see some significant savings in some line items. Moving to the 130,000s, that's your vocational curriculum. You actually see a 5.74% increase. Why is that? A large part of that is because of the addition of the additional industrial arts teacher. That's going to be funded by the gift or the grant from GCDC, but it's a new cost to us on our budget.
But there'll be on the revenue side though, the grant money will come in.
It will, yes. Now, as I said, though, that's really replacing a grant dollar that used to be in the budget that we didn't really get, right? So it's not going to show a $100,000 increase on the revenue side. that budget is actually gonna stay pretty static because we previously had the gift from Swiss Colony that we didn't use. However, from an expenditure side, yes, there are revenues that are coming to pay for that new expense. You then have all the co-curriculars, academic and athletics, that, Eric just talked about. You actually see that being pretty much static, and partly is we're gonna have, with the new salary schedule, some changes in what some of those pays are. And so I'm guessing when we get to the end of the year, we're actually gonna see a slight decrease, in what the actual expense is. I was able to capture it for some areas, but there's just so much little dollars that get spread out throughout that entire thing. It was tough for me to capture, like, truly to the penny exactly where all those we're gonna hit. The 170,000s, once upon a time, that used to be mainly gifted and talented, but once they recoded ELL up there, the majority of that budget, the 171,000 multilingual students, that's our ELL budget. English limited learners, English as a second language, it used to be called. You see, that budget has been growing over the years as we've applied more staff into those areas. And
Special needs is closer to 5%.
yeah, so, and it's not special needs, it'd be non-English speaking students.
Oh, I see.
The 210,000s are all special ed services. And again, there's some changes in there. Some of it is we've had some staffing changes with new people being placed into roles. Some of it is just some of those line items. I'm trying to think which ones are there. Some of it is just people that are still moving through the scale. So there aren't many of those folks that have been here long enough where any of them are topped out on our salary schedules yet. 220s, curriculum staff services, you actually see a reduction there. Part of that was as we made some of our changes, there was some reduction to the curriculum development budget line item. We also had a change in how we are staffing our libraries, both from, we reduced one aide as well as a half of a librarian. And so that is the biggest chunk of the reductions that you're seeing there. General admin shows a slight reduction of 0.68%. You know, I lowered our legal budget a little bit because we're actually coming in even less than that this year. And so hopefully we'll get back to, that's kind of back where our legal budget used to be, was more in the $40,000 to $45,000 a year range. And so I'm hoping we'll be trending back in that direction again. Office of the Principals, most of that staff is both from the secretarial and administrative level is the same. Some of it gets into how the principals apply their building budgets. A lot of them end up putting some dollars there so that when a third grade classroom at the end of the year says, I need new furniture, they then allocate it out to that area, but they hold it kind of in their budget at their level until they know what that's gonna be. And then in the 250,000s, you see a 4% reduction. There's some reduction there in our transportation costs. We had a bus route reduction. There's also some reductions there in some of our building budgets. We have one custodial position that we're currently not filling. And so that's a short-term solution because we know what we're going to need that position when the new high school is open. Central services, you see an increase there. That really is driven by, we used to get E-rate covered most of our phone costs. E-rate no longer covers phone costs. It covers our data costs, but it doesn't cover some of our standalone phones that we still do have in our existing buildings. And so now that they're not getting a 70% discount, that's going to raise that budget line item. The Retirement benefits in the 290,000s, not a significant change there, 1.4%. We're at the point now where we've kind of started to balance out where the savings that we're seeing from those receiving the old benefit is matching kind of with the increase in people who are receiving the new benefit. So for a while there, it was growing, and now it's kind of leveled out, and eventually it should even see a slight reduction over time. The operating transfer to Fund 27 in 411 there is showing less than a 1% growth, again, because of some of the reductions in the special ed staffing that was made. General tuition payments, a couple of them you see that went up. One is we don't know what that, the 400, and I apologize, my eyes aren't as good as they once were. The 438,000 line item, that is my best guess as to what the voucher school payment's gonna be. Now, granted, that comes with an offsetting revenue that, that's the one that we find out in October. Here's an additional amount you can levy to pay for students who are going to private voucher schools. And oh, by the way, here's the expense that we're gonna take away from you as a deduction in your aid. And so, as you can see, 2 years ago, that was 42,000. Last year, it was 99,000. This year that we're in currently wrapping up, it grew to 173,000. So I'm assuming that's gonna be 220,000 or more come next year. It'll be an offset of a revenue and expense, but it's something that does drive the total budget when you look at what expense numbers are changing by. General tuition open enrollment, we'd hoped we were gonna drop a little further last year. The 195 is kind of where we're landing, and so I think that's a real number. Do we hope that we'll recapture some of those people and lower that? Yep, but I think that's probably a more realistic number right now to be leaving in the budget. Grand total of all those expenses in Fund 10, you can see it's a 0.54% increase, and so really that's a product of that $1 million of reduction that we made in the last year, offsetting for the most part any growth in our budget that we had. And so our revenues have been staying pretty static over the years, and so as you have your CPI increases, the only way to keep that from growing is by making reductions and basically trying to keep your expenditures flat as well. Quickly jump to the functions for 27 through 80. We won't go into these nearly as much detail.
Ron, just a quick question on the last one, because that's just an overarching. So, I mean, when you take in the revenue totals, expense totals, so our $1 million of cuts, we ended up about $160,000 worth of savings this year over last year. Is that what I'm seeing?
No, we truly had $1 million of savings. What you're, so I'm not sure how we're, I think I get what you're trying to say, but, so we actually saw our expenditures increased by 170,000. However, had we not made the $1 million of reductions, our expenditures would have grew by 1.2 million.
You're saying like inflationary pressure and those kind of things. If we not cut $1 million, we'd be at 1.2 million.
Right.
Higher.
So I mean, you have your, whether it be utilities, whether it be your purchase services, whether it be your staffing, salary and fringe, right? All those costs are increasing. And so had we not made $1 million of reduction, instead of seeing $180,000 increase to the budget, we would have seen nearly $2 million increase to the budget. Because the budget reductions were real, they were done. But it's just, there was also new costs or increased costs that were going to the budget as well.
guess I'm just looking at it, the drawdown of our general fund. Last year, we were 2.6 million lost, this year we're 2.441, so.
Yeah, that was expected to actually grow. So, it was, our deficit, had we not made those million reductions, that deficit was gonna grow even more. Because again, our revenues aren't growing at the rate that our expenditures are doing. So had we let our expenditures grow by 1.2 million, that 2.4 would be 3.4.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so that's where, we were targeting hopefully that 2.4 would be 2 million. And we had some changes in a few things that didn't allow that to be there. Now, again, I'm hoping that we can close that ground. The other thing we'll see before, we get too far into this fall is, where exactly that 2.6 came out. I'm anticipating it's gonna be somewhat less than that. When I looked, today, we're probably gonna be, 500,000-600,000 hopefully to the good on some of the expenditures. However, we're gonna probably be a couple 100,000 short on some of the revenues. And so, maybe it's 400,000 less than that. Maybe it's a little better than that. I'd like to get it down to, so it's 2 million instead of 2.6, but I don't know if we're gonna quite get there with some of the revenues lagging.
Remind me again, rough numbers, if that 2.6 is where we land for this year, where does that leave our fund balance at?
Started with about 8, so that takes you down to about 5.4.
So then another 2.4 next school year, and we're definitely in a bad place, because then by, 27, 28, by 29, 30, we're.
Right, that's why we said we would have to identify any potential reductions that we were gonna look at in advance of running the referendum. So that should the referendum not pass, we would have to be queued up and ready to make those reductions. We couldn't afford to wait till after to identify what those would be.
Assuming no change in fund from the community, as I look at this budget for 25, 26, that's short-term cash borrowing before the end of the next school year, correct?
Most likely, yes, yeah.
Short-term cash borrowing is expensive.
And so that's why we've done a great job of avoiding that for a number of years. I think as we've said, when I first came, we were $500,000 in the hole, and we were, paying $300,000 a year on interest. And we've gone a lot of years without paying any interest for short-term cash flow borrowing. So it's not something I like to do. It's not an area I like to be in. But it's something, a lot of districts are in that situation. So we're not unusual in that regards. But again, I would rather spend money on people and programs for kids rather than for interest to a credit card payment, for lack of a better word. Looking at those other funds, 127 always has to balance out, and so you'll see that the revenues and the expenditures do balance. And with that said, what really is the big number is that first line, what's the operating transfer, which is the money from Fund 10 that is making Fund 27 balance out. And so it's been 4 million, give or take, for a number of years. And with the reductions we keep making in special ed so that the costs don't grow, it's been hovering right around that number, anywhere from 4.1 a couple years ago to 3.8, then roughly 3.9 this last year, so almost 4. Costs, again, there you see in the 150,000, which is all the base pays, you actually see an increase of 2%, but you see a couple of line items that had pretty significant decreases, driven by, some of the staffing changes. A couple line items you see increases. Partly that is just a reallocation, like that emotional disturbed person, our new person licensing has an LD license, and so we have to recode them from ED to LD, and so those two net out. And then we did have, the one area where we, are just, it's a specific program where we have a little more aid time, but then we have aid savings down below in like the 159, 170. So for the most part, it's not a staffing change per se, other than we've actually had to make some reductions to keep it from growing more.
Is the net 1.98 increase then?
That's for the educational cost of teaching staff. You then get into the 210s, which is some of the other services where you get into your psychs, OTs, PTs. We had a reduction of an OT, and so you see that was a 27% decrease in that line item. And so our cost of all those special ed services for OTs, PTs, psych type people was a 6% reduction. And then you get into some of your other support services, which are just some of your administration of it, as well as, some of the allocations of dollars from IDEA and things of that nature, and trainings. And you see that budget basically reduced 1%, so pretty static there. And then when you get into special ed transportation, again, we're hoping to see a slight reduction there. We'll have to see at the end of the year if we're able to achieve that, but that's our goal right now. And then I didn't change the tuition payments. We'll just have to see what they shake out to be if we get any better information this fall. But total for special education, EEN there, you can see the expenditures on 0.4% increase. So again, offsetting any increased cost by making some of those reductions in, the OT staff and some of the other places that we had some small changes. Fund 38, we don't have anymore. That's been expired. And then Fund 39 is the payments for the new high school. You see that the expenditures will always be a little more than the revenues, and that small amount of difference is basically just like with your home mortgage. The first payment of the year in the fall for us is always, we have to have those dollars booked in advance so that because we don't get the tax revenues until January, right? And so each year our interest cost becomes a little less. So the amount of money that we have to make that fall payment becomes a little less because our interest keeps getting a little less every year. And so that's why you always see that we'll always have a little bit more expenditure there than we do revenues. Fund 49 is the remainder of the project. Again, some of those interest revenues, some of those long-term investments that used to come in and, had been gaining interest for months on end for a couple, 3 years. For some of them, they're going away. Most of our interest revenue over the remainder of the project are going to be short-term, month-to-month interest revenues. And obviously, we still have, as I mentioned earlier in finance, our expenses are ramping up as we have more and more people on staff and more of those subs work getting done. Fund 50, you can actually see, I'll go all the way down to the bottom line. We're projected right now to have a net increase of $37.50. Now, with that said, that's before the allocation of dollars from Fund 50 to the new project. Our fund balance during COVID ballooned from about 200,000 up to nearly 800,000. So we're actually able to apply a number of that fund balance over to the new equipment that's going into the new high school. So that's good because the DPI keeps telling us we need to lower our fund balance. And so that's one way we're going to be able to do that. And we've been very fortunate for years that our food service has operated in the black. For some districts, they end up making a transfer from Fund 10 over to Fund 50. So that's something we've not had to do. So we've been very fortunate there. And then Fund 80 is the public library. Basically, for now, using status quo with what their budget was from last year. They'll be getting us some new updated budget numbers during the course of this summer to put in there before we go to the annual meeting. I'll jump quickly over to Fund 10 by object. We won't go through all the other funds by object. But if you pull up the Fund 10 by object one, just because this is how we typically look at the revenues. And so you can see in the first line with the current year property tax, if the Joint Finance Committee's current allocation of saying, yep, we have the $342 increase to the revenue limit, but we're not going to put any new dollars into general state aids, all those dollars then get passed on to the taxpayers. And so you would see it would be a 6% increase potentially. So I'm hopeful that at the state level, they work on that and maybe come to some resolution there. Put some funding back into the general aid allocation for schools. Interest on investments is a line, I told you that got reduced down to 250,000. And again, and partly it's interest rates, but partly it is because our balances, cash balances decreasing. Gifts, 291, that's where you can see it's still staying pretty steady at that 100,000. It's just a question of this last year, we really didn't end up getting it. So our received is gonna be less because we didn't run the elementary Spanish program. However, next year we will be getting the grant dollars from GCDC to help fund the tech ed teacher. So the budget doesn't change. However, compared to what our actual for 24-25 is, yes, we'll be getting dollars when we didn't have the actuals in 24-25. And one thing right now, equalization aid, you see, it's at 18,950, basically the same as it was last year because that's what they're saying it's going to be. Every school's formula will change a little bit based upon our expenditures in the previous year. So how we spent compared to how other districts spent might change our number a little bit, but for the most part, I just kept it fairly the same because they're not putting any additional allocation in there. Library aid, they put money into library aid, and so that's been an increase that we saw this year, and it's an expected increase we'll have next year as well. So that is the one area of aid that has been growing. And then for right now, with the federal dollars, we've kept them status quo. Obviously, there was a little more uncertainty there, 3, 4, 5 months ago as to, were some of those going away? And I can't say that some of them might not go away. But some of that talk has been lessened as our federal government has some other things they're dealing with at the moment. So yeah, on the revenue side, 1.1% growth on the revenues. Predominantly driven by the increase of the $342 in the revenue limit, and again, which if no dollars are allocated to the special ed or to the general aid allocation, then that all becomes a cost on taxpayers.
Where do I find special ed revenue from the state?
Special ed revenue from the state, we then have to go to you're gonna make me pull up the next one. You go to funds 27 through 80.
Yeah, finish.
Nope, that's fine. I was done with that one. So if you go to the fund 27 to 80 by object. And right at the top is the fund 27 special ed budget. And on the revenues, you can see the handicap aid. I don't show it changing really with with the amount that they ended up putting into it is not that significant. And with us making some staffing cuts in special ed, I really don't see that number moving much for us. Because some of the reductions we're gonna have in our special ed costs are going to reduce the amount of aid that we get. And so, adding a 2-3% factor to it just doesn't change the ball that much. And so, hopeful that it comes in a little better, and if it does, then our transfer becomes a little less, but that's why you don't see that number moving significantly right now.
And I've got a question just to make sure I'm tracking kind of the overall picture here, if that's okay. So this past school year, we had a roughly $2.5 million structural deficit. We made $1 million in cuts, but that wasn't deficit, $1 million. You're anticipating that would only reduce our deficit by roughly $450,000, $500,000.
Yeah, we were trying, we had a projected deficit of over 3 million, and we were trying to get down to just over 2 million is what we were trying to do. And then obviously, as I pointed out, some of the things that changed, in the assumptions, you know, the, interest revenues, I'd have to go back to my notes, they're in your notes too, of all the things I said when I first started talking. Let me get to that.
I think you mentioned in finance, like work comp and property insurance costs.
Yeah, some of those went up more than that, but yeah, so some of the big drivers were obviously the reduction in the interest revenue. You know, the fact that the GCDC grant is real new dollars, but that gift line item would have been going down otherwise, but now we have a real cost there with, now that we've added a tech ed teacher. And so, it's a funded program, but otherwise we would have been seeing that revenue line item go down 100,000, much like we did with the dollars for the interest. The other areas we mentioned certainly was the change in health costs was significant, right? I mean, we had hoped that we would save about 240,000 of savings by making the change. We are seeing that savings. However, when you had a 19.5%, we're actually going to be able to need to make even greater changes to make even more savings just to get back to zero. So those are some of the big reasons for the adjustment from, you know, it going from about 3.1 down to nearly 2.1 instead of being about 2.44.
And on top of that, so essentially we're going from a $2.5 million deficit to $2.5 million deficit. And what came out of joint finance committee polls, people are gonna see an increase in the property tax.
Most likely, yeah, just because the only revenue that's coming to the school is the increase in our revenue limit. Obviously not growing at enough to keep up with our needs. However, without any additional state aids put into the factor, you know, it's all ends up being on our taxpayers. The only dollars, the only quote new dollars, and you know, I explain this every year, and usually it's being facetious, but this year, unfortunately, it's a bit true, is no matter what your allocation is, you can say that we're putting, I'm gonna make up a number here, this isn't the number. You can say you're putting $100 million into, you know, and it's billions that are really put into public education, right? But let's use 100 million. You can say you're putting $100 million into public education. In the following year, put $100 million and $1 into public education and say it's a historic investment in public education. True statement. Doesn't move the bar. When you look at this year's budget, we have a minuscule increase coming in to special education aid and no other dollars going into public education. The allowed increase to revenue limit is coming on the back of taxpayers. And they're trying to do that to position it, you know, politically so that they can point the fingers at the governor for making that increase permanent. But the reality is schools needed that increase and more, and they also need, and our taxpayers need, some aid dollars coming into schools to help fund it.
But the irony in the per pupil aid increase,
Let's not, oh,
that
there is a per pupil aid. That's not changing.
the 320,
The revenue limit per pupil amount, yes.
I mean, that was the work of the legislature, what the governor did was extend it beyond.
Yes,
the biennial
exactly, yeah.
budget.
Yeah, and if you look at it, 342 is really only what CPI is for districts that are at the low end where we're at. If you're at the high end of that, that's not even keeping up with CPI. Getting rain. So yeah, so over the course of the summer, we'll finalize these numbers before we take them to the annual meeting. Hopefully, some of these will get better. Hopefully, the picture at the state level may get better. You know, nothing has changed in the sense of there isn't some knight on a white horse here that's saving us from having to look at an operating referendum next spring. We're going to have to look at that operating referendum next spring, and we have to have a plan in place that should that not pass, there's gonna be significant reductions that'll have to be made to balance the budget.
Questions from board members for administration?
Well, this is like a, for the benefit of all of us, Ron, this is a temporary operating budget until we hit September, October, when we get state funding finalized, and then the community will approve the budget.
Yeah, so we'll have an update for this board in September that will get approved to be taken to the annual meeting. And then the annual meeting will be approved in October, and we always have that weird thing of about 2 weeks later or a week later, we finalize based upon what we finally learn some of those allocations are. I'm hoping we'll have a good sense of what the state picture is in advance so we can take that to the annual meeting. Worst case scenario, there's been years when they didn't finalize the state budget until about October 8th. And that's because DPI needs about a week to be able to run the numbers to figure out what everybody's aid is. So that's about the drop dead date that the legislators can do it, but it's horrible when it's that late.
But, I mean, do we have a deadline that we need to approve? The community needs to approve the budget?
We have to, as a district, we have to approve our levy usually by November 6th, so that that we can then get it on our tax bills when they get sent out in December. So that's really the drop dead date. That's why we always have to make that adjustment in the end of October, right after we have our annual meeting, to make those adjustments to the final dollars.
Okay. That's an action item.
It is. So let's see if there's any other questions before we go to discussion here. I do. Any board members want to share their perspective? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Motion from Mike F. Second by Phil. Any discussion before we take a vote here? I'll just say thank you, Ron and Joe, for all the work you guys have done. And I mean, I'm guessing none of us are looking at this feeling thrilled to be approving a temporary operating budget at these numbers. It's a pretty stark reality. But like Phil said, the temporary sort of doing business, keep working at the picture over the next few months. With that, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron.
It was better news.
Informational items, administration.
I don't have.
Board of Education correspondence. Got enough updates here. Committee reports. Start down at the end. Got no student update. Down at the end with Nicole. Committee report. Phil?
Finance met prior to the board meeting tonight to review April and May financials.
Phil? Mike? Steve? Davis? Nikki?
Employer relations, met, we're going to propose to talk about that. Otherwise, nothing else.
Okay. Nothing for me. Items for future discussion. Board members want to put something up for the future?
Yeah, kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I think the board and admin need to start now, given this budget, looking at what the future district is going to look like. So I'd like to talk now about adding that to future agendas to create two scenarios, what it looks like with the referendum and what it looks like without, because we really need to understand that as a board and as a district and as a community.
Shoot that, Mike.
You and I had a conversation recently about creating a timeline to that effect. I don't know if you wanted to share that or if you want me to speak to that.
You can speak to
Yeah, so just to echo what you said, like Jim had shared some similar thoughts, and I think one of the things that Ron and I and the team are gonna need to do is start sketching out a path forward for two possible realities. And part of that's gonna involve some decision-making by the board. Some of it's gonna involve looking at options that we'll have to consider as a school district. But I think it does make a lot of sense for us to be very clear about when we are going to communicate some of that information going forward for the benefit of not only the staff, but for the community. So that's work that we'll start putting together. We definitely want to be on the front end of that discussion and not waiting too long so that people are feeling rushed with some important and thoughtful conversation.
Yeah, because obviously what we don't know yet is what the state budget is, but we do know that if the referendum doesn't pass, there's a huge hole there regardless, right? So the semantics of, is it this much or is it that much, isn't so big. We know we have to start tackling, if this doesn't pass, it's gonna be a big number. And even if we don't know exactly what that big number is until the state budget passes, we need to start preparing for it.
I'd be surprised by the state budget, but if history tells us anything, we won't be.
Other items? All right, yeah, liaison reports, doesn't look like master meeting today. 5 minutes for the press. We'll count those down. It moves into closed session. So I'll read this out and then make the motion. So Wisconsin State Statute 1985, C, employment, promotion, compensation, and performance evaluation of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction of exercising responsibility, to wit, administrator and exempt staff, compensation discussed. Look for motion. Motion by Nikki. Second. Second by Mike. So all in favor, say aye.
Yeah.
Nikki, call.
Nikki, yes. Green?
Yes.
Davis? Grassett? Joel Josephs? Is absent. Spear? Is absent. Phil Bosworth? We'll have to come back out and because we're voting, right?
Speakers back, Heather?
You?
Wait on me. I've got 10:20. Look for a motion to convene into open session. Motion,
Second.
Mike F., second by Nicole. Can you? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. I've got 2 action items up for tonight. Next up is the approval of exempt contracts and compensation 25-26 school year. So I look for a motion to approve exempt contracts and compensation as presented by administration.
So
Davis, second by Phil. Any discussion before we vote?
I'll be abstaining.
Thank you, Nikki. I've got a couple of comments that I want to share. I'm going to break these up into 2 parts. So as a board, alongside the administration, really trying to balance 2 critical imperatives. One is that phenomenal talent, people who are responsible for our kids every day and responsible for moving this district forward in a tough talent environment. And so we need to remain competitive and we need to take care of our at the same time, even more about tonight, we're in a tough budget constrained environment. So the compensation, both that we voted on 2 weeks ago and tonight, reflect the board's necessity to balance those 2 imperatives. And so last week we mass base increase group of 2.95% step changes. We approved professional staff on MBA 2.95% plus step increases. And right now we're about to approve the same approach for our exempt staff, a 2.95% base increase for the group plus step changes to our compensation study for 2022. And with that, is there any other discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And finally, I'll look for a motion to approve the administrative compensation proposal as presented by administration.
So moved.
Motion by. Second by Steve. Any discussion? Just want to make a particular note on administration contracts. So we took the same approach for administration as recommended interim superintendent and police administrator with a 2.95% base increase for the group. And because of some of the staffing changes, it's important to note this is a net neutral change year over year. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that that is very uncommon in this day and age. A net neutral change for an administrative of a school district. And 2 special notes for that. One, I want to make a special call out and thank you to Joe as our interim superintendent for the past few months. Has taken on really 2 jobs, the duties of being an interim superintendent while covering his previous job without any pay increase, an offer that he came to the board with when he took on the interim superintendent role. And second, also agreed to take on compensation 25-26 school year at a significant cost relative to the previous superintendent compensation. Just appreciate the administration's approach overall, and I want to thank Joe for his leadership in this situation too. With that, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. That'll look for your final motion at 10:24. Motion by Mike, second by Nicole. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.